The millionaire mocked an old man, claiming he owned the truth, until his prized bull made a choice that proved him wrong. What happens next will leave you speechless. The shouts of men echoed off the crumbling stone walls of the bullring as ropes tightened and wooden gates creaked into place. Dust rose in the hot air, catching the afternoon sun in golden strands. Farmers and laborers moved briskly, their shirts stained with sweat, their hands rough from years of toil. Some hammered nails into the stands, others painted faded banners, and all of them wore the same tired but determined expressions of men preparing for tradition. The festival was more than entertainment. It was the pulse of San Lorenzo, the one event that made the town's heart beat louder than the rest of the year. And then, stepping into the square like he owned not just the bullring, but the very air the men breathed, Elias Cortez appeared. His white suit was spotless despite the dust swirling in the heat, his polished shoes gleaming like mirrors. Every movement he made was calculated, his chin held high, his handkerchief flicking away imaginary specks of dirt. Behind him trailed his assistant Darren, a lean man with sharp eyes and a smile that never left his face. Though it was rarely his own, it existed only as a reflection of Elias's mood. Elias's voice cut through the hammering and murmurs. "Look at this place," he scoffed, turning in a slow circle so the men would hear every word. "You waste your lives patching up stone that should have fallen decades ago. Tell me, what future do you see in this pile of dust? Do you think tourists will come here to watch animals run in circles while men wave sticks at them?" His laughter rang out, sharp and cold. The workers exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Many depended on Elias's lands for work. His hotel projects had swallowed half the region already, and no one wanted to be the next victim of his cruelty. A few forced chuckles slipped from the crowd, nervous attempts to appease him. Darren leaned close and whispered something, and Elias smirked, his voice growing louder. "You men cling to dying traditions like children holding broken toys," Elias went on, raising his arms. "I, however, see what this place could become. Luxury hotels, glass towers, swimming pools that reflect the sky. Real progress, not this." He waved dismissively at the bullring. "This ruin." His words carried across the square, bouncing off the weathered stone. The atmosphere thickened, a tension born from pride wounded yet too afraid to fight back. It was then that Elias's eyes fell on a solitary figure. On the far side of the ring, standing half in shadow, was an old man leaning on a crooked cane. His clothes were worn and faded, the color drained by sun and time. His face bore deep lines carved by hardship, but his eyes, dark and steady, never wavered. He did not move, nor did he join in the laughter. He simply watched the gates of the bullring with the patience of a man who had seen too much to be amused by spectacle. Elias tilted his head, a slow grin spreading across his face. "And what do we have here?" he called out, pointing with a mocking flourish. "A relic among relics. Tell me, old man, are you waiting for the past to rise out of the sand and rescue you?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Some lowered their heads, others whispered. They knew Raphael. Everyone did. He had lived in San Lorenzo all his life, surviving on little, keeping mostly to himself. Some said he had once worked with bulls when he was young, that he had known the ring better than any man alive. But those were only rumors now, tales fading like smoke in the wind. To most, he was just another shadow of the past. Raphael did not answer. His hand rested on the top of his cane, fingers curled around the worn wood, and his eyes remained fixed on the gates. The silence in response seemed to irritate Elias more than words could have. "You see?" Elias sneered, spreading his arms as if he had proven something grand. Even he knows the truth. Silence is the only answer left to those who refuse progress, a beggar clinging to a dream that's already dead. Darren laughed loudly, clapping his hands as though Elias had delivered a performance. The crowd gave nervous chuckles, though their eyes betrayed discomfort. Some glanced at Raphael, waiting for him to defend himself, but he remained still, his presence calm and unbroken. His silence seemed deliberate, like a stone that could not be moved by wind or water. Elias, impatient, took a step closer. His polished shoe pressed into the dirt, staining it slightly. He narrowed his eyes, his grin turning sharp. "Look at him," he declared. "Living proof that the past has nothing left. You, old man, should be grateful I haven't bought the ground beneath your feet yet." Finally, Raphael turned his gaze from the gates and looked at Elias. There was no fear in his eyes, no anger, just a depth of patience that unsettled even those who watched. The silence stretched, heavier now, as though the air itself was waiting. Elias shifted, uncomfortable for the briefest moment, but quickly masked it with bravado. He raised his voice, letting it echo across the square. "No one in this town can stand against progress, least of all a penniless relic like Raphael." The words cracked like a whip, slicing through the stillness. Some men winced, others looked away, ashamed of their laughter. Raphael, however, did not flinch. His cane pressed slightly deeper into the ground, his eyes drifting once more toward the gates as if something beyond them mattered more than Elias's insults. His calm was unsettling, a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any argument. And though no one could explain it, the moment hung heavy in the air. The crowd shifted uneasily, sensing something beneath the surface, something waiting. Elias's voice carried triumph, but it was hollow, unaware that the seeds he had planted in mockery would soon take root in ways he could never control. Elias, impatient with the quiet man's calm, declared again, louder this time so that none could mistake his words. No one in this town could stand against progress, least of all a penniless relic like Raphael. The roar of voices filled the bullring, echoing off the cracked stone walls and bouncing into the dry air above. Men shouted over one another, their laughter and excitement building into a fever pitch. The stands trembled under the weight of the crowd as boots stomped against the wooden planks. It was the day of the festival, and all eyes were on the man who had promised to give them a spectacle unlike any they had seen before. Elias Cortez stood in the center of the ring, his white suit blazing in the sun like a challenge to the heavens themselves. He held a bright red cloth in his right hand, waving it with a flourish as if he were already the victor of a battle yet to begin. His face wore the smug confidence of a man convinced that no tradition, no beast, and no man could rival his wealth and power. He spun slowly, savoring the noise of the crowd, raising his arms as though the applause itself proved him right. At the edge of the arena, Darren clapped loudly, shouting above the rest, "That's the man of vision! That's progress itself standing before you!" His voice cracked with forced enthusiasm, but his words stirred another round of cheers from the men around him. They clapped their hands, hollered, and leaned forward eagerly, waiting for the gate to open. Elias tilted his head toward the massive wooden barrier where the bull waited. His smile widened. "Bring me the beast," he called, his voice calm yet full of authority. The handlers, two young men with nervous hands, exchanged quick glances. Their faces were pale as they touched the heavy latch. Everyone in San Loreno knew the name of the bull Elias had chosen. Sombra was not just strong, he was feared. Black as midnight, massive in size, and unpredictable in temper, he had injured men before without effort. The latch creaked. The gate trembled. Then with a sudden crash, it swung open. Sombra thundered into the arena like a storm loosed from the mountains. His hooves struck the ground with such force the earth seemed to shake beneath them. His massive chest heaved, his muscles rippling under his dark hide. Sunlight struck his horns, turning them into curved blades of silver. His eyes blazed with fire, a wild fury that sent a hush sweeping over the crowd. For a moment, Elias's grin faltered, but he quickly raised the red cloth high, snapping it toward the bull. "Come on then," he shouted, his voice almost lost in the thunder of hooves. He planted his feet firmly, determined to show no fear. The crowd roared its approval, believing the spectacle was only beginning. Yet in the shadows of the stands, Raphael sat quietly, his cane pressed firmly into the ground between his knees. His body leaned forward slightly, his face unreadable, but his eyes followed every step of the bull with a focus that no one else shared. Unlike the cheering crowd, he did not see entertainment. He saw meaning. Elias swung the cloth again. The movement was sharp, bold, exaggerated, meant to impress rather than control. But something strange happened. Sombra did not charge the red fabric, nor did he lunge at Elias with the blind rage everyone expected. Instead, the bull slowed, his massive head lowering, his nostrils flaring as he pawed the sand with one hoof. Dust flew up around him, rising in a golden haze, but his eyes were not fixed on the man waving the cloth. They were locked on Raphael. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. The cheering quieted into murmurs. Darren's voice faltered as he tried to stir the men again, but his words lacked strength now. Sombra's focus was absolute, and it was not on Elias. The bull's heavy breaths filled the air, his muscles coiled with restrained power, yet he stood still, waiting. Elias frowned, snapping the cloth harder. "Here! Here, beast!" he shouted, his voice edged with irritation. He lunged forward a step, swinging the red square with more force, trying to draw Sombra's attention. But the bull did not move toward him. The only sound was the scrape of hooves against sand as Sombra's body angled slowly, deliberately, toward the quiet old man in the shadows. Gasps spread across the arena as Raphael placed one hand on his cane and began to rise. His movements were slow, deliberate, every shift of weight pressing meaning into the moment. The crowd watched in disbelief as he pushed himself to his feet, his cane steadying him as he stood tall. His clothes, faded and worn, looked out of place against the spectacle of the ring. Yet in that moment, the air around him seemed to change. "What are you doing, old man?" Elias barked, his voice sharp with disbelief. He pointed the cloth at Raphael like a weapon. "Stay where you are. You'll only make a fool of yourself." But Raphael did not answer. He lifted his chin, his gaze meeting the bull's as if they shared an understanding no one else could grasp. Then, slowly, he took his first step into the ring. The sound it made, the soft tap of his cane against the sand, was louder than the shouts of 1,000 men. Gasps erupted in every direction. Hands flew to mouths, eyes widened, and even Darren stumbled back a step. No one could believe what they were seeing. Sombra's body lowered further, his massive head dipping as though acknowledging Raphael's presence. His nostrils flared, his breath a deep rumble in the air, but he did not charge. He waited. Elias's face burned red with anger. "This is madness!" he shouted, turning to the crowd as if seeking support. "He's senile! He'll be crushed in an instant! You'll see!" His words carried force, but they did not silence the unease spreading among the men. Raphael took another step, then another. His cane sank deeper into the sand, yet his movements were steady, almost serene. The space between him and the bull shrank, the silence of the arena broken only by the pounding of Sombra's breaths. Darren's voice broke the stillness. "Elias, he's not stopping." "Of course he isn't," Elias snapped, his bravado cracking. "He wants to die a hero. Let him." Yet even as he spoke, his eyes darted nervously between the bull and the old man. The crowd leaned forward, unable to look away. Every man held his breath as Raphael stepped closer. Sombra's ears flicked, his body shifting slightly, but he did not move to attack. Instead, he pawed the ground again, dust rising like smoke around his legs, his eyes never leaving the old man. The red cloth in Elias's hand hung limp now, forgotten. He swung it weakly once more, but it felt like a child's gesture in the face of something greater. The bull's attention was unshakable, as though the spectacle Elias had promised was no longer his to give. And in that stillness, the truth began to surface, not through Elias's voice, not through the spectacle of wealth and arrogance, but through the silent bond between beast and man. The crowd, once loud with laughter and cheers, sat frozen in disbelief. The whispers grew louder, threading through the silence. They spoke of legends, of old truths buried beneath arrogance, of something greater than pride. Raphael's presence in the ring was no longer that of a frail old man. It was of a figure called forth by fate itself. Elias barked again, his voice trembling beneath its anger. Foolish, absolutely foolish. Yet no one laughed with him now. No one dared. The moment had shifted, and every man in San Loreno knew it. The truth began to reveal itself, not through Elias's words, but through the bull's choice. Elias snapped the red cloth sharply, circling the bull with wide steps, his polished shoes sinking into the sand. His teeth clenched behind a thin smile, every movement meant to reclaim the attention he could feel slipping away. But Sombra didn't so much as twitch in his direction. The massive beast's dark eyes were fixed elsewhere, ignoring the cloth, ignoring the posturing, ignoring the performance. Each crack of fabric that once would have drawn fury now seemed like nothing more than the sound of a child's game. The crowd, which had moments before roared in excitement, fell into uneasy silence. Their cheers drained away, leaving only the scrape of Elias's shoes and the bull's heavy breathing. Men who had laughed at Raphael earlier now leaned forward, their brows furrowed, trying to make sense of what was happening before them. The bull was not responding to Elias's strength, wealth, or bravado. It was waiting. And everyone began to realize it was waiting for someone else. Raphael stepped forward, his cane pressing into the sand with steady taps. His every movement was deliberate, unhurried, as though time bent to his pace alone. The sound of his cane echoed louder than Elias's snapping cloth, louder even than the restless murmurs in the stands. The old man's face was calm, unreadable, his eyes locked on Sombra with the quiet intensity of someone meeting an equal. Sombra's massive head lowered. Dust clung to his horns as he bent them closer to the ground, his body shifting into a posture that looked almost like submission. A wave of gasps erupted from the crowd, some men clutching their hats, others standing without realizing they had risen. The silence broke into whispers. "Did you see that?" one man muttered. He lowered his head. "It's as if he knows him." Elias's face turned crimson. His hand trembled as he gripped the cloth rod tighter. He raised his voice, letting it crack like a whip. "Trickery! That's all it is!" he shouted, his words fueled by desperation more than certainty. His chest heaved as he pointed the cloth toward Raphael, his gestures sharp and erratic. "You planted this beast, old man. You trained it to make me look a fool." But his words sounded hollow against the sight before them. No trick could explain the way Sombra stood, massive and deadly yet unmoving, waiting only for Raphael. The old man stopped just a few feet from the bull. His cane sank into the sand as he leaned slightly forward, his free hand reaching out with slow certainty. The moment stretched, so tense it seemed the entire arena forgot to breathe. Then Raphael's fingers brushed against the bull's neck. The mighty animal, feared across the region, stood still, docile as a lamb beneath the touch of a frail old man. The ripple of gasps that surged through the stands was louder than any applause. Men who had once mocked Raphael now pressed their palms to their mouths, as if they were witnessing something sacred. Some began to whisper stories they had heard in childhood, tales of men who once shared bonds with bulls, men chosen not by wealth or power but by truth. Elias's body shook with rage. He could feel the crowd's attention slipping from him, their awe shifting toward the old man and the beast. His position, his pride, his control, everything was crumbling before his eyes. His voice broke with fury as he shouted, "Enough of this! Enough!" In a sudden burst of anger, Elias lunged forward. He lifted the rod high, aiming not at Raphael but at the bull's flank, desperate to strike something, anything, to remind the world that this was his stage, his spectacle. The rod sliced through the air as he brought it down with force. But in that instant, Sombra's head snapped up. The sound that erupted from the beast was like thunder, a deep, earth-shaking bellow that rattled the very bones of the arena. His horns flashed in the light, sharp and deadly, as his massive body surged forward. The ground seemed to quake as his hooves tore into the sand, and he did not charge at Raphael. He charged at Elias. The millionaire's eyes widened in terror. His limbs flailed as he stumbled backward, barely dodging the first strike. Sombra's horns cut through the air inches from his chest, slicing his suit open with terrifying precision. Sand sprayed high as Elias fell to the ground, rolling clumsily to escape the deadly force. The pristine white of his suit turned brown with dirt, patches torn and stained. The crowd erupted into shouts, their voices a mixture of warning, disbelief, and awe. Some cried out Elias's name, others gasped at the sight of him scrambling like a cornered animal. Yet no one moved to help him. No one dared step into the ring between the beast and the man who had mocked them all. Elias clawed at the sand, his polished shoes slipping as he tried to rise. His face was pale now, drained of the confidence he once wore so proudly. He lifted his rod again, his hand shaking violently. But before he could swing, Sombra lunged once more. The beast's horns tore through the air, forcing Elias to dive aside, his body sprawling in the dirt. Through it all, Raphael did not move. He stood calmly, his cane resting lightly against the sand, his eyes following the spectacle with the stillness of judgment itself. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, each word sharp enough to cut through the noise of the crowd. "The bull sees what men refuse to see. Truth cannot be bought, Elias." The words hung in the air like a sentence passed down from something greater than man. Elias froze where he crawled, his chest heaving, his eyes wide as the meaning struck deeper than the horns ever could. Around him, the crowd fell silent again, every man understanding the weight of what had been said. But Sombra was not finished. He charged once more, forcing Elias to scramble on hands and knees, crawling through the dirt that clung to his white suit. His face contorted with fear, his mouth gasping for air as he tripped, fell, and clawed his way back up again. The dust rose around him, choking him as he stumbled desperately across the ring. Sombra pressed closer with every pass, his horns missing by inches, his roars shaking the stands. Elias begged under his breath, the words lost in the noise, his voice nothing more than a broken whisper drowned by the beast's fury. The crowd, which had once expected Elias to shine, now began to shift. Men leaned forward, clapping, shouting, not in support of the millionaire, but in awe of the old man who stood unflinching and the bull that had chosen him. Their voices rose higher, no longer warnings but cheers. "Raphael!" some called. "Sombra chooses truth!" others cried. Elias, his body shaking, his pride in tatters, realized too late that he had lost more than control of the bull. He had lost the respect of the very people he sought to rule. The spectacle turned from a display of power into a public humiliation, and the crowd began to cheer, not for Elias, but for the old man and the bull that had chosen him. The dust had not yet settled in San Loreno when the story began to spread. Men left the arena whispering in disbelief, their boots striking against the cobblestone streets, voices trembling with excitement, shame, or pride, depending on what they had witnessed. The air seemed charged with something unseen, as though the roar of the bull and the stillness of the old man in the ring had left an invisible weight pressing over the town. By the time the evening sun sank behind the red-tiled roofs, word of what had happened had already reached the taverns. Merchants spoke of it with wide eyes, travelers repeated it with awe, and villagers argued over its meaning late into the night. Some swore it was a miracle, others whispered that it was a curse. But none could deny the truth. A proud man had been humbled in front of all, and a beast once seen as savage had revealed a dignity that no human hand could command. The next morning, the arena, once loud with laughter and cruel anticipation, sat silent. Its gates remained open, but no one entered. The sand inside still carried the marks of the struggle, deep hoofprints where the bull had stamped, the grooves where Elias had crawled, and the still steady footprints of Raphael, the old man who had not bowed. Inside a darkened chamber of his mansion, Elias sat slumped in a chair. His once bright eyes, so often alight with mockery and arrogance, were clouded now with something heavier. He poured wine into a cup, but his hand shook as he lifted it. Across from him, Darren lingered, arms folded tightly across his chest. "You cannot hide forever," Darren said quietly, his tone a mixture of irritation and pity. His voice echoed against the high ceiling, where even the chandeliers seemed to hang in judgment. Elias's lips curled into a faint snarl. "The people, they exaggerate. It was nothing but chance. A beast startled, a crowd overreacted. Soon they will forget." But even as he said it, he knew the words were empty. He could still feel the grit of the sand against his palms, still hear the low growl of Sombra's breath, still see the eyes of the old man standing unflinching while he himself had crawled. The image haunted him. Darren leaned closer, his expression tense. "They will not forget. Merchants are pulling out of the demolition deal. Investors will not touch your project now. They say the arena must remain, a place of memory. They call it sacred." Elias slammed the cup against the table, wine spilling like blood across the polished wood. "Sacred?" he spat, his voice cracking. "It is a ruin, nothing more than dust and stone. I will not let one old man and a beast dictate my future." Darren's gaze hardened. For years he had followed Elias, carried out his plans, and defended him against whispers of arrogance. But now, in that room, he saw not a leader but a broken man clinging to pride. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is not the bull that ruined you. Perhaps it is your own laughter that has finally turned against you." The silence that followed was heavy. Elias turned away, his face pale. Darren bowed his head slightly and left, his footsteps fading into the corridors of the mansion. That night, without announcement, he packed his things and disappeared from Elias's side. Across the town, life shifted in another way. Raphael, the old man who had stood beside the bull, returned quietly to his modest home on the edge of San Loreno. He did not celebrate, nor did he allow others to celebrate him. When neighbors came with questions, with praises, with offerings of food or drink, he simply shook his head. "I did nothing," he told them, his voice steady but humble. "It was the bull who revealed the truth. Arrogance falls when truth stands firm. I merely stood still long enough for you to see it." Men who once dismissed him now listened carefully. His words, spoken without pride, carried a weight that silenced taverns and marketplaces alike. For years, Raphael had been overlooked, his wisdom ignored. Now, each phrase was repeated from one mouth to another until his sayings began to travel farther than the town itself. Meanwhile, Sombra was taken back to the ranch outside San Loreno. Yet the people would not let him fade into obscurity. Farmers left offerings at the ranch gates, baskets of grain, buckets of water, flowers cut from their gardens. Children whispered stories of the bull with reverence, and men spoke of him not as a beast, but as a symbol. In their hearts, Sombra became more than an animal. He became a living testament to integrity, a reminder that strength without cruelty carried more honor than any staged fight. As days turned into weeks, the town transformed. The arena, once a monument to arrogance, was no longer a place of laughter and spectacle. Instead, men entered its gates in silence, walking the ring not to cheer but to reflect. Some knelt in the sand. Others touched the stones of the walls as though they could still feel the echo of the bull's defiance. The once proud building had become a place of remembrance, not for blood spilled, but for dignity revealed. Elias, however, could not escape his shame. Every attempt he made to restore his reputation only deepened his fall. At a council meeting, when he tried to speak of progress and wealth, men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their eyes no longer met his. Whispers rippled through the chamber like wind. The man who crawled. The man the bull spared. The man who was laughed at by his own town. Once his laughter had dominated every room he entered. Now it was his silence that followed him. And when he forced himself to speak, the memory of sand in his mouth choked the sound before it could rise. Travelers carried the tale far beyond San Loreno. In distant markets, men repeated it with awe. In taverns, strangers leaned across wooden tables to whisper, "Have you heard of the old man and the bull? Have you heard of Elias, who crawled in the dust while dignity stood tall beside him?" The story grew, reshaped in every telling, but always it ended the same way. Arrogance undone, truth revealed. Raphael continued to live quietly, though his name was now carried farther than he ever wished. He spent his days tending to his small plot of land, walking the narrow paths outside town, or sitting quietly at the threshold of his home. Yet even in his silence, men sought him out, hoping to touch the calm that seemed to follow him. One evening, as the last light of day painted the hills in gold, a group of young men came to his door. Their voices were eager, their faces bright with admiration. "Tell us, Raphael," one asked, "how did you not fear the bull? How did you stand while another man fell?" Raphael looked at them for a long moment. His hands, rough from years of work, rested on his knees. His eyes, steady as stone, met theirs. "Do not mistake stillness for courage," he said softly. "Fear was with me. But truth does not bow, even when men tremble. That was all." The young men lowered their heads, thoughtful. They left quietly, their laughter gone, replaced by respect. And so, the memory of what had happened in the ring became more than a single event. It became a lesson woven into the fabric of San Loreno, carried in every whisper, in every cautious glance at the arena, in every retelling of the story. Elias remained in his mansion, his windows closed, his voice seldom heard. He tried to speak in public again, but each time, the image rose, his body crawling, the crowd laughing, the old man standing tall. It crushed him more than silence ever could. In the end, it was not the bull's strength or Raphael's stillness alone that ruined him. It was the truth itself, laid bare in front of all. In the end, the bull had chosen the truth, and no wealth could erase that moment from the memory of San Loreno. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of arrogance, unexpected wisdom, and the profound unspoken connections between a human and an animal. This narrative aims to highlight that true worth and respect cannot be bought, and that a genuine relationship is worth more than any price.